This coming week may be an intense week for many, for various reasons, one of which will be that this week honors the 23rd anniversary of the tragedy that occurred on 9/11, when many people who were preparing for an ordinary day at work, or being tourists, or boarding their planes to travel, were ripped away from this plane of existence by an attack that brought destruction and fear to people, not simply nationally, but internationally, as the world realized things would never be the same again. For those who remember that day, several things came out. Firstly, the shock and the horror as to what actually happened, the disbelief. Secondly, the way people began to come together, comforting each other, helping each other, showing kindness, things that may not have been seen in quite some time. Thirdly, the stories that came out of that day, stories of heroes, of survivors, of the people and animals, notably rescued dogs, who died, and the stories of those left behind. Even today, on this anniversary of 9/11, we continue to see stories posted on Facebook or other social media platforms. People feel a need to tell their story so that this can be remembered, so that their experiences can be remembered. And from their posts, their photos, their shares, their storytelling, we learn more about this person, who they are, or who they were. Stories inform us as to who we are, where we come from, and can be a source not only of learning, but of remembering. A quote from many sources reads, "We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us." This can give us the identity, strength, and pride that we need to survive whatever comes our way. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. Such a profound statement. Like stories, this statement teaches us that we are not on our own on our journeys. It teaches us the power of community. A quote from Terry Gandadia about a dying Aboriginal man talking to his 11-year-old grandson reads, "Our ancestors didn't have a pen and paper to write their stories down, so we hold it in our heads. When we hold it, it makes us strong, proud, who we are." It is the teachings that we pass on to the next generation that helps create that feeling of strength, identity, and pride, a recognition that we walk our journeys together. I'm remembered of how we stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us, from people who may be in a recovery program, whether it's AA, NA, Smart, Dharma, to other communities of support. I'm reminded of how those who have walked this path before can pass down their experience, strength, and hope to those who are new, and remind them that mistakes may be made along the way, but that those mistakes can be learned from. And you will not be the first person making such mistakes. Those people who have come before you have probably made them too, and can not only empathize, but as those who have come before you, can help you rediscover your identity once more and find strength and pride because of their stories, because they will tell you how they dealt with whatever that situation was. And connecting can help through that storytelling rather than the isolating that we might experience with that potential sense of shame. A poem we shared just before this message started, called "To My Younger Self," reads, Close your eyes and breathe in the air, because nothing will smell this sweet for the rest of your life. Take a look around you. Notice the beauty, because the world won't seem beautiful again. Let your curiosity take over and explore. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because at this age, those mistakes won't hurt you. Teach yourself to put your heart away at your most vulnerable moments. Learn to protect it, to keep it strong, because one day your self-confidence will weaken and your strength will die down, and your heart will be the only thing that can keep you on your feet. Your world will become complicated. You will change in ways you wouldn't believe. You will hurt the people that you care about, and you will be hurt by the people you love. Enjoy everything now, because one day you're going to miss it all. As that poem says, the world does become complicated. It can feel unsafe at times. We may try and hide in the shame that we feel, but as we hear the stories of similar experiences, or of courage, of loss, and of, in the words of Rabbi Harold Kushner, how God, by whatever name you may know God, works through humanity, prompting people to save others, risk their lives, donate money, be present to people. That whether the disaster is natural or of human design, that the response is where people can come together. And that is where God, universe, human decency, or by whatever name you know this source of guidance is. We're called to live into the response to the events that happen in our lives and the lives of others. We will certainly hurt others, including the people we love, and others, including the people we love, will hurt us at points along the way. But how are we going to respond? If the events of 9/11 have taught us anything, it's to learn how to enjoy and embrace this present moment. It's how to take a look around you and notice the beauty. Breathe in the air, because there will be times that the world may not seem this beautiful again. And when those times come, and they will, we need to remember these moments of beauty and joy, of our heart maybe being the only thing keeping us standing, so we don't get sucked into the destruction of negativity, pain, and isolation. Now, don't get me wrong. When we are grieving, as the nation did around the events of 9/11, and as friends and family members of those who directly died as a result of 9/11, even more so grieved, we do not ignore or try to stuff that pain down. We risk learning about how to open up about it. We share the grief we are feeling, the experience, the fears, and eventually the potential hopes. We tell our stories. We tell our stories, and when we tell our stories, it brings us together as community, as people who can grow together, learn from each other, have shared experiences. Shared experiences is exactly what the majority of recovery programs that exist are about. Telling our stories and growing in hope, strength, and identity. On the night of 9/11, many religious as well as secular communities held remembrance services. These meetings were so that people could come together in community to be a witness to each other's grief as well as our own. Again, when we are a witness to each other's story, we can begin to build a sacred bond with each other. we can build trust. We can grow together in community and as individuals. And so it is that with time, experience, and patience, we may eventually become the people we had previously looked up to. Yet to recognize this with genuine humility, that other people may be looking up to us, we recognize that our stories may have something important to teach someone else, as much as the important lessons our stories taught us. This can be seen as both humbling and terrifying. So we remember our stories, our values, and what it is we want to pass on to that next generation, the good times and the lesson learned. It reminds me of that song by Green Day titled Good Riddance, Time of Your Life. And it says, another turning point, fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable that in the end is right. I hope you have the time of your life. As we think about the people who have been influential to us, maybe there's someone you have met while you've been here, or maybe others in your life. And as you think of them, I want to tell you about what I know about a man who is integral not only to Caron, but in Berks County and beyond, the recovery community in general, and the LGBTQ community amongst others. And I want to tell you a little bit about his story, because although I didn't know him as long compared to many, many other people, he left a legacy that goes beyond this institution, and I, like many here today, want him and his stories to be remembered. I was remembering our own Father Bill this past Friday. He died on September 6, 2019, and I was remembering him in prayer this past Friday on that anniversary. During his life, he had some profound experiences, endured serious childhood trauma, served in the military, had a genuine desire to give back to people with humility and love, and was often displayed, which was often displayed in bluntness and then sometimes more than the occasional swear word. Nevertheless, he was loved because of how he cared. And I want to tell you a few things about who he was and what he did. So a little bit about who he was. He was the first director of spiritual care here at Caron Treatment Centers. He built up the spiritual care department, making it an integral part of Caron's culture. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, HIV and AIDS became an epidemic, killing people who may have been considered to some as marginalized, less than, whether that was members of the LGBT community, IV drug users, those who are unhoused, those with mental health conditions, and others. He and his wonderful colleague, Reverend Charlie Beam, another man who is worthy of many stories to be told about him, decided that those who were at that time living with HIV and AIDS needed a safe space where they could meet on a regular basis. And so the first HIV retreat was started, bringing together many people who are living and, yes, sadly dying of HIV and AIDS. I want to share that a few of these symbols up here, including this first symbol in front of us here and the drummer boy, some of these symbols were actually memorials from some of these people who were at the very earliest HIV retreats. And there are loads of stories about them too. But there was poignancy in these retreats. These people became the biggest support to each other. And in a world before internet, social media, and cell phones, Friday nights were especially meaningful, as much as they were painful, as those who arrived waited and waited for their friends to arrive. Father Bill would recount that when their friends didn't arrive to that retreat, it became clear that they had died from their illness. And so Friday nights were not only a celebration of getting together again, but were also a time of grief and mourning for those who had passed. During chapel on what is now known as the LGBTQIA+ retreats, on the Sundays, we have held a roll call of the dead. We remember our roots. And even knowing how far we have come with medications and ways to manage HIV and AIDS, and how powerful this retreat is for so many people. And the phrase, never forget, comes to mind. Never forget our roots. Never forget the why of why such a retreat was created. Another story about Father Bill is a real lesson in humility. Some years ago, I remember assisting Father Bill in chapel, and he was presenting and he was sharing about the day he was due to receive his 39-year coin at his home group. He shared that when he was asked when did he want the coin presented to him, he replied, "Just give me the 1 day at a time chip that you give to newcomers." "Why, Father Bill? 39 years is a really big deal. Why would you want the newcomers chip?" His reply was, "Because just like everyone in this room, I'm only 1 day away from starting over. 1 day away from being back to day one." Now I want you to think about the humility in that statement. If anyone can say such a statement as this, then isn't it possible that there is a hope in the ability to start over? That whether a person has 1 day clean or 39 years clean, recovery puts every person on the same page as equals. A friend recently reminded me that life is 90% perception and 10% what happens. Another quote by Rabbi Harold Kushner, as he remembered a similar lesson taught by Viktor Frankl during his time in Auschwitz. He said that nature may have no choice. It can only follow its built-in laws. But human beings confronting a natural or even human-made disaster can choose how they respond. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond to what happens to you. In Father Bill's story, he did not see the 1 day or 39 years as anything other than, as Green Day would say, lessons learned in time, and how we respond to even a lapse or relapse, or the events that led up to those, might be with regret or bitterness, or being kind to ourselves and recognizing this lesson learned in time, as it's not too late to start over. A final story that stuck with me about Father Bill during those early years before interventions were a thing. He was invited to help a woman with an intervention on her daughter, who was angry, using and drinking, which had gotten out of control. Now, the mother had been in active alcohol use disorder when her daughter was growing up, and the daughter had taken care of her until the mother got sober. Father Bill admitted that back in those days, he didn't have a clue of what a formal intervention was, as they weren't really a thing at that time. So he went around to talk to them. Now, when the daughter realized what was happening, she became angry. Calling her mother all sorts of names and yelling at her, she said, "This is your fault. I took care of you when you were drunk. I couldn't have friends around because I didn't know if you'd be passed out on the couch. You created this problem." The mother looked at her daughter with compassion and said, "You're right. I did create these problems for you. I wasn't there for you while I was drinking. And yes, I created these problems. But you have the solutions. I created the problems, but you have the solutions." Now this is a powerful message that reminds us that we do have a choice. Just as addiction of any kind wants to try and take that choice away from us, we do have a choice. It also reminds us again that life is 90% perception. Are we going to fall into the trap of blaming or shaming, including ourselves? Or are we going to look at how we respond to the resentments, the shame, or whatever the struggle is that may be going on in our own lives? So when you think of your life, and you think that your life and your stories feel overwhelming, you may not be able to make a difference, so why bother? Think of Father Bill, who cared deeply for those who were marginalized and fought hard to make a difference in their lives by bringing people together in various communities, by telling his story and making a difference in the lives of so many people, staff and alumni, as well as people outside this community. And again, when you think of your life and your stories and they feel overwhelming, that you may not be able to make a difference, so why bother? He would be the first to tell you that you can make a difference, that you do have a choice, that someone or something, maybe even you, may have created the problems that led to your disease, but that you also have the solution. And with the help of telling your stories to your communities, hearing the stories of other people, with the help of your support system and communities, and a strength greater than yourself, that you can become the person that you were intended to be. Amen.